Welcome to our Awe and Wonder AAC podcast. We're in Series 2, Leaders and Changemakers, and we have a leader and a changemaker today, Lauren Enders, who's joining us. Yay. We're so excited. I'm Sarah Kinsella.
And I'm Brenda Del Monte.
And we're here.
I'm Lauren Enders.
There she is. There's Lauren Enders.
Gonzalez. I know I'm actually starting to tack on the Gonzalez. So I got married right before. Yeah, so I got married right before the world closed, and then Social Security was closed forever. So
my gosh.
I never did anything about my name, and then it gets hard after a while. So
are you going to be Lauren Enders Gonzalez or just Lauren Gonzalez?
I would like to just be Lauren Gonzalez.
Okay,
that would be the ideal situation.
Okay,
yeah,
but okay. It might take some time, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah. Okay. So Lauren, well, congratulations.
Congratulations.
Okay, so Lauren Gonzalez, thank you so much
for
joining us. Yeah. So,
thanks for having me.
Lauren, will you tell us just a little bit about yourself? Everybody we all know you, we all see you, we see you on social media, we see all these amazing things you're posting and all your conferences and trainings. You're just amazing, but tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and how you got here, or what you do. What else?
It's kind of interesting. So I was in undergrad, I was undeclared. I had no idea what I wanted to do. And I was encouraged by my parents to take an aptitude test at the library at the community college.
Nice. Wow.
So I was already in. I was like at the end of my sophomore year, and I had no idea. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, guess what came up? Speech language pathology.
No way. That's amazing.
Wow. That's rare.
So I was just okay.
I'm happy it was on there.
Then it got more complex because I was at University of Delaware and they did not have a program. Mm-hmm. And I liked it there. So I ended up in this strange situation, which probably was good. I was able to jump into this program called the Dean Scholar Program, where they took all the regular breadth requirements that you would usually have for any major, and they dismiss those. And then you find advisors who are closest to what you want, and you make your own major.
Oh, wow.
Well, that was what I did undergrad.
That worked out well for you.
Yeah. And then I went to the University of Pittsburgh for my master's.
Okay. And then, what about after that? What was your?
Well, I thought before I started that adult neuro sounded like the right thing for me. Mm-hmm. But when I was in Pittsburgh, I was fortunate to have all different kinds of practica. So I had, hospital, inpatient, outpatient, school, special school. I had, all kinds of stuff. And I realized I was a different person after I worked with kids with physical disabilities who needed assistive technology. I was a completely different, I was like so energized from that. So When I graduated, the first thing I did was ask for that population. And when I got my job, they're like, okay.
Yes, please. Yeah.
So
was that in the schools? Your first job?
Yeah. So I have been in the schools the whole time, and trying to think. I was with in Pennsylvania. Our regional service agencies are called intermediate units, and I was with one particular intermediate unit from the time I graduated from Pitt until 2002, maybe 2002. Mm-hmm. And then I came to the Bucks County Intermediate Unit, and they initially didn't have an AT position. So I had a class. I had a bunch of kids on 3100s back in the 2000s. But the most interesting thing, I think, is that I was going through. Did you ever do young authors when you were a kid, where you make books? Our school, we had something called young authors. And we would write these books, and then we would publish them with contact paper on the outside.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
So my book from first grade is called The Dog Who Couldn't Bark. And it's basically about how somebody teaches this dog to bark. It's very, or I taught, I don't, it was just completely weird when I realized after the fact, like, that's sort of ridiculous.
Oh, wow, that's so neat.
That's amazing. Yeah. Do you still have it? You do. That might be fun to see.
Yeah, well, Lauren, we're asking everyone, and maybe this happened in your practicum, or maybe it happened in one of your first few jobs. Is there a particular student in your career or throughout, this process? And obviously, every student particularly has taught us something, but is there a particular student who inspired you to kind of do more, that contributed to your why, so to speak? Everyone has been able to tell us a little story about Junior or Susie or somebody that was like, that was one that is going to stick with me for a minute.
Well, I think the challenge with me is how many of them there are.
Yeah, I know. I know. I think that too.
Because if I'm thinking about it now, I had the good fortune I've been a full-time consultant since 2008. Okay. But I had the good fortune to be assigned a student in 2020 in the fall. 2020 or 2021?
During COVID,
yeah. Mm-hmm. And it ended up being just one of the best things that ever happened, because I'm still a consultant, but I can use all the things that I talk about. I can kind of actually see what works better, what doesn't. So if you had asked me this over the years, I would have given you different people.
Yeah. What about way back in the beginning?
In the beginning.
Maybe one of the first people who kind of made you go, I love this. I love this AT stuff.
Oh, that's easy. So in the very beginning, one of my practicas was at what used to be called the Rehab Institute of Pittsburgh.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Which is a center-based school for kids with physical and cognitive disabilities. Sure. So, and my supervisor, my clinical supervisor, she did a lot of AT. That was it. It was just like, at the time we were working with the students. So it was Pittsburgh. We were working with the students who were on the brochure for Tobii Dynavox, because, it was all, it just happened to be in Pittsburgh.
Sure.
Yeah.
But then also, I'm in PRC land, and so I got to see, all different systems, different kinds of kids, different kinds of disabilities and etiologies. But I kind of figured out that I loved the AAC and the AT, not just AAC. I'm pretty nerdy. It's pretty much anything that's techie and makes life easier. I'm good.
All of it.
Do you remember kids that were super lowballed that came and they're like, oh, I don't think they can do anything, and then you gave them the technology and proved them wrong?
I wouldn't say that while I was a grad student, I do, because, I was just kind of walking into it, and the clinical supervisor was the one that was already their therapist. Yeah. But man, does that happen all the time?
Yeah, I know.
So did you kind of develop the AT role in your district where you're consulting?
That's a good question. Yeah. So when I was in Delaware County Intermediate, my previous intermediate unit experience from 1995 to 2002, always was interested in AT. I was always learning it and using it. And that was clearly part of me. But in 2000, I was given an opportunity to join the staff development AT team part-time and be a speech therapist the other part.
Okay.
So I got an AT mentor, Susan Gill, she was amazing. And I got to shadow her for 2 years.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
That's neat. So that was an established practice they had, is you're new to this, you got a mentor.
I don't know how many, I mean, I don't know if that was always the way that it worked. I don't know. I don't know. Yeah.
I love that, because we've been talking a lot, both on the podcast and outside of the podcast, the difference between training staff and actually providing mentorship, right? Like how to edit a button and then actually how to do everything else in the whole career, right?
Yes, so very different.
They are. So what did the mentorship look like for you? What did that service delivery model look like?
I literally I followed her around.
Yeah.
And I, eventually took over things, and it was coaching.
Yeah.
Which works. So, and she's incredibly bright and, very, very capable in terms of all of the AT. So I had, and interestingly, the person who's on my team now in Bucks County, Bill Ziegler, he was very close friends with Susan because they had the same jobs in different counties. So I actually met Bill when I was 25 because he would come up to Delaware County IU. So I kind of have been in this AT cocoon for my whole career.
So what did she tell you what to do, or did she let you figure stuff out and fail right in front of her? Like what was the balance there?
She didn't tell me what to do.
So you had to try stuff, even if the restraint for her was not going, that's not going to work. She just let you try stuff and learn from that.
Yeah. Now, fortunately for me, I had been working with kids who needed AT and been doing a lot of that stuff as a speech therapist for several years at that point.
Right.
So, for, I guess, 95 to 2000. So 5 years. So like I had some experience.
Well, sure. Yeah, you were great.
But but I did plenty of things wrong. And I would say that I did things wrong last year or this year.
Right.
Yeah. That's how we learn.
We talked about how much more we learn from our, that didn't work. Then we luck out and it works on the first try. We didn't learn that much from that experience, but it's not a comfort zone that most people have. Especially as speeches that come out of, kind of type A personality pieces where perfection is expected. So you have to kind of fight that when you're trying stuff nobody's ever tried before, and you're seeing people with diagnosis who's never lived this long with that before, and we've never seen this level of degeneration in this age of person, and all that are little medical miracles, and now we've never seen this body and this brain at this age, at this time. And so there's not a lot of, all the other people, kids, children, students like them do this. So you have to kind of be able to MacGyver some things. I know that I first knew of you back in the, right when the iPad was coming out, and for AAC, and you had like the most extensive Pinterest I'd like ever seen on the history of the planet. You probably still do. I don't go on Pinterest as much.
Well, it's still there. It is not at all up to date, which makes me crazy. But I only have so many hours in the day. So,
but this is the thing, is that what you did was like people like me that were like, okay, I got to figure out a stylist, and it's got to have these features, or, this is the grasp, this is the grip, this is the button size, like even little things like that are very specific. Like, I don't need 2 of these. Right. I literally, this one kid needs something this really dialed in. Then instead of just Googling iPad stylist, I could go through, and you had like vetted like what they were, how to get them, everything that I hadn't even thought of that were accessories or possible accessories to accessing the iPad. And then switch access to the iPad has changed over every iOS update, frankly. And you also had information about that. And I remember you and Jane Farrell, who we also had on the podcast, was like, I would go on hers and find out what are switch activated apps, but what are switch, adapted apps. This is before switch control on the iPad. And then I'd go on yours and be like, okay, so, but what can I do? What are other little pieces I can do? And what I loved about what you did and what Jane did is that you made that accessible to the rest of us. There wasn't, I didn't pay anything to go to see all your stuff. You just made that stuff like, I know this, and I think other people need to know this. And here it is.
Mm-hmm. And it was kind of, it came out of, it sort of also came out of, I kept trying other ways to do, I ended up being the one who knew about iPad cases for AAC. Mm-hmm. And right. I actually, at that point, when the iPad first came out, I wrote to all the companies, and I had them all for free from the companies, all the different cases. So then I could actually say what they were like, and right. It just. But what would happen is people would say, "Well, what's the best case?" And if I was trying to keep a spreadsheet updated, it was outdated as soon as it's a day old. So at the time, Pinterest was new, and I was like, this seems like it could work. Mm-hmm. And interestingly, it wasn't a great, it was far from a great time in my life personally. So that's what I did to,
just give you some extra time, and you put that.
Yeah. And just also that infinite use. I'm very externalized. I'm a person who, like, if I can make somebody's life better or help or that's my true happiness. Right. So in the feedback that I would get that I was helping all these people, that would just spur me to do more.
Yeah. And it's a product. Sometimes we don't always get to see a product and be like, here it is. I'm done with this. And, it's like we work with long-term gains often. So that's kind of nice to have that. Here it is. Lauren, I was thinking a lot of those things, like you said, they because technology changes so quickly. It's like, I got to update that whole thing. And here we are now with the latest whatever. But the things that you don't always put on Pinterest, right, that we can't just easily post and share with people are some of these like guiding principles around technology and working with students. And the things that are harder to kind of wrap up in a picture or a word. But I know that since, you've started, and like you said, you've spent your whole career in the schools, and there must be so much that is the same and is consistent from the day you started working to now. That what are some of those guiding principles that, regardless
of haven't changed, regardless of the advancement in technology, these things are still true?
I think from the beginning, while, certainly viewpoints and, there's ebbs and flows and things change, but I think ultimately one of the things that maybe kind of drove me in this direction is I'm a person who feels pretty strongly that people are people. And it was pretty upsetting to me if somebody was treated as less of a person, whether it was, for whatever reason.
Yeah.
But I saw that it happened with disabilities too, and that there were, incredibly low expectations of folks. So, I'd say that is the same, that I feel like I've always maintained that I have higher expectations. Although I think they've gotten higher.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
As I've gotten older and more experienced, just today, I went to work with a little guy. He's been using AAC for a couple of years, but it's, kind of stagnant. And I was like, let's just try this. And I took my iPad with a 96 location user, and I took Canva.
Your fave.
And, you know, I just had him kind of say, well, I was like, what do you like? You know, and then I was like, oh, you know, there's in this talker, there's lots of animals. So then I went into the animals, and it was something that I had programmed, and I grew up watching PBS and nature programs. So there's a lot of animals in there. But he would say something, and then I'd be like, that's what you need. So then I would go in, and we would find it on Canva, and we'd blow it up, and then I'd make it huge, and I'd be like, oh, that's humongous, that's giant. And then I was like, well, should we leave it like that? And he touched tiny. But it's like, so I had this full conversation with this child who, you know, I don't know that I feel like I have learned to really kind of up the ante in terms of, you know, where to go.
Yeah.
I think it's a student that I might have, maybe 5 years ago, I might have put 60 location in front of him.
Right. So you gave him.
Not that he couldn't do that, but it was just kind of like, I just had this, you know, there's just like little gut, and he was giggling, and like, it was adorable. It was adorable.
There's a few things about that, Lauren, that you talked about that kind of stand out. I mean, one is that, like you're saying, you're kind of upping your expectations. So you gave him more vocabulary than maybe you would have thought about. You also were following his lead, right? That was all about what he wanted to talk about. And I know that activity that you're talking about, sort of, because I went to one of your classes at, I think, ATAA, and you did that, and you blow up the animal, and then it's like, what can the animal be holding? And that's when I fell in love with Canva, watching you talk about that.
Whatever he said. He said he wanted a tiger. Oh, what kind of tiger? And then we were talking about the size, and we're blowing it up huge. And then he is giggling. But I think people vastly underestimate the difference between following a child and trying to get a child to say what you want them to say. And I think that's actually standing in the way of the field at the moment.
I agree.
Yeah. And that is also standing in the way of that child's progress, right? And that we're working on that teaching or testing, and not teaching and connection and all of that. And what I also love about that story is that you're also modeling for that class, the teacher or the para, whoever you were with.
Yeah, and that particular, it was an SLP in that instance, who I've had the chance to work with before, and I was thrilled because she was jumping right. She got it. She just, you know, she completely got it, and then that's really invigorating for me. I really think that maybe part of this whole external type of thing, one of the things that I enjoy most is somehow I'm a lot of people's unofficial mentor. And like in different countries, because people find me on Facebook. So that's something I really, really enjoy.
Isn't that amazing? Yeah. Well, and I love that, you know, you're doing this with the student, and you started the whole thing saying, let's try this, right? You're modeling like, it's okay. You didn't come in there saying, I know that we're going to do this activity, it's going to work, but you're letting that SLP.
I didn't think I was going to do that.
Right.
I had my iPad out because I said to him, I was like, I have my talker with me. Is it okay if I use my talker too? And he's like, so cute. So I really wasn't intending to do that, but as I watched how accurate he was and how quick he was, I was thinking, wait a minute. Like, I think this is beyond anything that I thought. I mean, even me, who has significantly higher expectations than a lot of folks, it's like, wait. So it was pretty exciting.
You know, this comes to mind, though, something that we've talked about privately, Lauren, and that is that in some ways we kind of hope that AAC implementation is in its infancy, and that we actually don't have all the guiding practices, because the best practices, I guess, established yet, because we continue to find things that we're like, oh, Yeah, the way we were doing it is getting data points, but it's not authentic communication. Like we're re-looking at at some of what we may have thought initially was best practice and realizing it's not. Hand over hand's a really good example of that. People that have thought all along that hand over hand was a really good practice, and we're coming back around to the research from 25 years ago, right? That's never proven that was what we should do. But what do you think about where we're at in the field, and what do you think that we have a handle on best practices for AAC implementation?
I think those of us that are in it up to our necks, I think we do.
Okay.
But I don't think that we have successfully been able to transfer that knowledge to all the people that need it. Agreed. And I think there's a lot of barriers that get in the way.
Yes.
I just did a session on Wednesday. I think my thought at this point is that the biggest barrier is that until folks can get past the mindset that you are trying to get that person to say what you think they should say,
mm-hmm.
that we're not going at we're not going to get there.
Yeah.
because people don't like to be told what to do.
Right.
And then people who have less control than somebody with maybe a typical physical abilities, then it's even worse because they're probably controlled because they have to be kept safe or whatever. So you will have somebody with already reduced control
mm-hmm.
that you are trying to control their language.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it goes really badly,
mm-hmm.
really
mm-hmm.
badly. But then the perception is that it's the individual.
Right.
They're just not learning AAC. So, the way that I presented it in my session was until we can get out of this mindset that, you're going in and you are trying to teach them to say these specific words and, this word in this situation, that is this, until we can get out of that,
mm-hmm.
that I think it's going to continue to go slow and stall and do all kinds
mm-hmm.
of stuff.
So what do you think is a step in the right direction there? Because I do training for staff as well. And, they want to test what the child knows using the AAC device. That's kind of like the plan. I even had a special ed director one time say, when do they graduate from their AAC device and just get to take the tests on the Chromebook? That was the question. And I was like, what? Like, those are not even in the same domain. Like,
mm-hmm.
what are you finding is a better way to explain things?
Well, I think that's part of a bigger overall mindset issue, is that differences are bad.
Mm-hmm.
That what we want is neurotypical, typical body, like that's what we're good. That's the ideal. And that we're always trying to work towards that for some,
mm-hmm.
that's until we kind of grasp that individuals with different abilities or different, everybody is contributing something. I mean, there are things, about me that I think are pretty irritating, but I think out of the same, whatever causes that, I think that makes me really good at other things.
Right.
That I probably wouldn't be as good at.
Right.
So I think until we stop trying to fix people
mm-hmm.
and we start trying to empower people,
mm-hmm.
I think we've got some work to do.
Yeah. So when you're with a team and you're in that kind of situation, this student's just kind of not,
they can't do it. They're not reliable.
Yeah.
They're not, they can't get the answer right.
What works for, kind of getting through to that team? I mean, we know you can get through the students, right? We just talked about that.
Well, I would say that sometimes I'm really successful and sometimes I'm not. I can think of two situations, similar situations that happened recently. One, the student had been, he'd had AAC since he was really little. He has apraxia of speech, bright kiddo, his mouth just doesn't do what he wants it to do. Awesome kid. And he really pretty much was refusing to use AAC. And I realized that unless we can get this kid to buy into the power of AAC, it doesn't matter what we give him.
Right.
He's not going to do it. So in the set meeting, I actually kind of launched into a mindset training, and talked about the fact that, the idea here is so that he can say whatever he wants to say when he wants to say it, or not say what he doesn't want to say, when he doesn't want to say it. And that's the piece but people are instead looking at, if I asked you to say this and you don't say it, that you're non-compliant.
Right.
So when it's looked at, so I was trying to show them the difference between a compliance-based effort and one where we're really focusing on empowering and giving them communicative autonomy, and trying to make, I was giving specific examples of kind of both sides of the coin. And then I said, I believe that there is no question that he can do this, and he can do this very well. But if we can't get this right here, that the age he's at, if we make this a job, a demand, if it's we could potentially have a pretty tough situation.
Where we're going to uphill battles from here.
Yeah.
Right.
But fortunately, this was a team that, the team, the family, everybody was just kind of like, okay. And so the first thing the speech therapist did was she brought the student and his friends, which I had suggested, down to the speech therapy room. And all they did for a whole session is come up with slang that they all used. And that was the only thing I put on that system initially.
How'd that go?
Great. I didn't know what any of that stuff meant, but
yeah, but that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
They do.
But I was just realizing that we've just gotten this all wrong. Like we need the buy-in first. We need to have him understand the power. Why would he even want to do this? If all it's like, oh, say this, answer this, like,
right.
So it worked great in that situation. I was in another meeting recently where a particular parent, she really hadn't left that mindset that the goal was to, and obviously she loves her child dearly. Right. It's not a matter of, lack of education, or it's just, it's a mindset, but she was not able to go beyond the fact that really what the goal is that he behaves.
Right.
Oh.
This is a child on the spectrum, and
yeah, we see that, right? Yeah.
But what the whole thing was about in the parent's mind was to control his behavior, to control what language came out of his mouth, to all of that stuff. Sure. And I don't blame that it's we're not kind of taught this stuff as we just grow up, so but in that particular case, in the initial meeting, I wasn't able to do a whole lot. The kinds of things that we ended up talking about exploring, I know won't work.
Yeah. So what did you do?
Well, they were just talking about, they were talking about solutions that can work. And I won't go into specifics, but what the team was deciding was that it was, solutions that will work in specific environments.
Sure.
And I was very quick to say that I was concerned about that because we're going to run into a problem, in the future when we're, when he's in an environment and he doesn't have access to whatever that was that we put in place because it doesn't work in that setting or whatever. But what I have learned from my student that I have as a speech student now is that you cannot force or bully or strong arm anybody into doing anything. You can't, because they're just going to resent you. Even though you think that you're going in there and you're fighting the good fight and it doesn't matter, because if they don't perceive it that way, then basically it's them against you rather than you making any kind of positive impact. And I learned that because I had such an opportunity with the student being mine, and then I get to work in her home and I get to work with her parents. I really learned that I had to slow it down. I had to knock it off, go on my high horse and, you need this many buttons. And was I right that she could use that many buttons? I sure was.
Yeah.
But if I had ignored the family and said, no, 9 is not enough. I couldn't have developed a relationship with the family where they actually trusted that I had her best interests.
Right.
So I think that I've changed a lot in the last 2 years. Not that I don't think that I was, somebody was, forcing people to do things, but I think that in my head more was that sort of expert model thing where, I know the things and that I share things with you. But I think that we need to have a lot of grace in the way we do this. And a lot of patience, and maybe give them far fewer buttons than we think they're capable of, if that's what it's going to take to show the family that you're in it with them.
Yeah.
Right. So
I was thinking about that too. Like it's not that much different than working with our kids, right? We're following the kids' lead. So then the parents, this is where the parents are at. So we follow that lead, even though we know the kid can talk about more than Elmo. If he wants to talk about Elmo, we're following that lead for right now. Even though we know the kid can do 84 buttons and the parents want to start with 9, we're following that lead too. Why? Because we're building trust, because we don't get past this, and it becomes the hill you die on, and it's not worth it. It's not worth it. So you got to figure out what's worth the battle and what is actually going to be detrimental to long-term growth. And then you go, we're following the lead of the team, because then the team has ownership of what happens next. The team has investment, and later the team realizes you were right. But they're not going to know that now. They're not. They just can't know what they don't know. And so following their lead is something that's really hard, because we were often taught from the expert model. So that's the model we know. So now it's like we are expected to teach in a model that maybe we haven't experienced as a student before.
No, I feel like it shouldn't have taken me till I was 51 to figure this out.
You and me both.
But it's true that, and we're learning from everything, right? And and that's sometimes we're the barrier in this staying creative and moving forward. But
we talked about this. Sometimes the SLP is the barrier.
Yeah. We're learning from it. I think
it could be anybody. Yeah.
Core vocabulary, right? We're like, we know we need core vocabulary, and that's become everything. And it's like, wait, we got to remember, oh wait, there's also a student here. There's also XYZ that makes this situation, right? I think as long as we're mindful of these things and thinking staying creative.
Right. I think part of it also is the evolution of the way we learn. So when we learned about core vocabulary, I mean, it was this, I learned from Gail, like she's amazing. And I wholeheartedly believe that she's right, that we do need those words.
It's very important.
But when we learned about it though, it was sort of a black or white.
Yeah. Right.
Like
exactly.
This is what you do. We didn't really have much of, you might want to start with this. I mean, we knew that some of the fringe stuff was important, but I don't think that we really got how important the beginning and buy-in was. So, I mean, in many, many situations, we always, okay, we're going to go in, we're going to bring the device, we're going to have go, stop, want, and more.
Right.
But what I try to explain now is those words don't mean anything yet until you can start modeling them in the midst of conversation about something exciting.
Right.
It's not, so I fully believe that, we need to be able to have spontaneous novel utterance generation. We need to be autonomous. We need to be, but I just think that we got a little too caught up for our own good, where I believe that the best practices and the principles are really not different. I think that we just need to have a little bit of softness as we navigate it.
Yeah, there's gray, and that's allowed. Vacuum cleaner might be a core word for that kid. That's what and because that's a core concept in his life. And grace for everyone where they're at in the process, and as opposed to coming in and saying, this is what we know to be true. So we're doing this for all kids. And then again, that makes it easier for us that we have some plan that we're teaching all kids these words today or whatever, but then they don't get to be autonomous. They don't get to have it student driven. They don't get to talk what they want, right? So it's like I think the pendulum swings back and forth quite a bit in the field, and you almost just have to be old ladies like us to even know that.
Well, I think some of that because those are important concepts, right? And that's why they keep coming back. And we learn from people like Gail, and this is important.
I mean, Gail is definitely one of my mentors. I mean, I'm not suggesting that,
not at all.
Not correct at all. It's just that I think that it was too black and white the way that I was looking at it before.
Well, that's the way we're looking at it. I agree. That's why I brought it up too. I think we do have to maintain some flexibility and some creative thinking, but I think some of that comes with experience too. And that's where we can help people, you, Lauren, are helping people who are newer or maybe don't have as much experience kind of start thinking about that that gray area, right? And how they can be flexible and have the confidence to try some, look at things in a different way sometimes.
Right.
I think one of the best things you can do is make people feel that they can do it. So if you can kind of engineer a situation where you kind of start this follow their lead thing, and then it just kind of rolls, and they see exactly what can happen. You can't refute data in front of you. You can't refute video. You can't refute real life stuff.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Good point.
I'm wondering, at the end of your career, in what areas do you hope that you've made the biggest impact? And what advice do you have people in the field to help grow forward?
I hope that I feel at the end of my career that I have done enough. I feel that I'm fortunate that I've been able to go this route and learn such a targeted area of our field. And I kind of feel responsible as one of the few people that really does try to stay on top of, what are our best practices? What are, I just want to know that, like, that I feel like I did what I could to teach other people. But as a mentor and support, not as, I don't want to just be this, presenter who just goes around and I want to be an encourager and a cheerleader more so than just a presenter.
Yeah. So what advice do you have for people? And, I think, we're in similar ages, and I think I want people coming into the field now to know what I know. I don't want them to get to my age and know what I know, because we'll never move the field forward. So let me get you up to speed. Even though you're 30, let me get you up to speed so that when you're 50, 20 years more than I know now. Right. What do you think what advice do you have for, to those that are wanting to move the field forward, and including, we're not retiring, you and me, just yet. So like, what's the plan to help the move the field forward, do you think?
I think that we need to hone our strategies for being able to support shifting mindsets. Really being able to illustrate, why, just because the mindset is the way it's always been, it doesn't mean that's what it should be. And to be able to truly illustrate, to have somebody really feel that, and I think that in a lot of ways we're going about it the wrong way. If you go about it as an instructional session, where there's a teacher and there are students to learn, I think it's far better to go about it with storytelling and interaction. And well, what did you experience, when you can kind of validate some of the stuff that they've experienced? I could be talking to a room full of paraprofessionals. I'm thinking of one particular training. And I knew that the practices that were happening with some of these paraprofessionals wasn't so great. Not because they're bad people or they didn't want to help the kids. They just didn't know.
Yeah.
But I unless I could kind of get them to the point where they trusted that I wasn't, first of all, standing there and shaking my finger at them and telling them what they had to change. It was more like, can you believe, like, it was like, did you ever have this happen? Like, it was trying to kind of make a connection, which is really, again, what we're trying to do overall is give communication so people can make connections.
Right. I was just talking to someone who was my mentor, Barb Lark, who we also interviewed on our podcast. And she was just telling me that she's had some really good connections with some people, SLPs. And she said, it's more of a thought partner. I'm just a thought partner to kind of talk about things with. And I love that term for something, talking about what we do. That's kind of what you described. It's, can you believe?
But I will say this viewpoint is pretty new for me. I really think that I was subscribing to that sort of expert model for a long time. Because that was what I was encouraged to do. Like, it wasn't that I thought that I was spectacular. It was just, that was what it seemed like I was supposed to be doing.
Right. And I think to be the experts in the IEP meetings and the experts with this. And
and I think you think, okay, I have these people for this amount of time and I want to give them as much information as I can. And what we realize is that you can do that and nothing sticks. And you could actually teach one thing. If you could teach one thing that hit them between the eyes, because you have the stories and you have the humanity and you're listening to how that would apply to them and their particular student and their problem piece and their hard parent and their hard teacher and their hard, right? Once you've talked it all out, if they leave with one strategy that they can apply to all kids, it's better than leaving with 50 ideals that they don't have a grasp on. And that's hard because we want you to know it all as the instructor. but it's not landing. That's not the way the sit and get isn't how it goes. Right. So it's like, you get in there and you're like, I'm going to change my agenda and teach you less, but teach you better, because we're going to make this personal. And as soon as it's personal, as soon as you identify this is what's hard for me, then you're ready to learn it. And that's what I want to teach you today. Whatever you identify as hard, which means even that's, again, we're applying what we were saying about kids. We go in, we have our agenda, but be flexible, because if that's not your student's agenda, they're not ready. They don't want to learn it. You walk into a class or in service or whatever you're doing. It's like, you have a plan, and then it's like, but we can go whatever direction you guys need to go, because if you take me in a direction, you're driving the boat, which means you're ready to learn it, which means you're leaving with a way, something that you're ready to implement, not what I want you to implement.
Right. Yeah. I think I had it in my mind that, like, even if you look at that, the boot camp poster, which is beautiful, and
we all love it.
Information on it. There's way too much information on it. And in my head was, I've only got so much space to say all the best practices that I have to share.
Right.
But we love, by the way. Why did I have to do it in one, in one document? Not that it's bad or anything like that. I mean, it's only 2 years old, but even my thinking there has shifted. I think that all the best practices in the world are not going to help until your mindset is going to allow you to support all those best practices.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And I think it's in smaller chunks than we realize, that it needs to be displayed, that it needs to be implemented, that it needs to be talked about, that it needs to be practiced. It's kind of one at a time.
Mm-hmm. Well, Lauren, we appreciate you talking through all of this with us, because I mean, even just during the conversation, I've learned a lot and thought about things a little bit differently. And I know that you're going to have that impact of that mentorship impact that you want. And also, selfishly, I'm glad you also have that presentation piece and your Pinterest and everything, and getting all your information on social media, all that you do. You just must be really busy, because there's always something. But know that
a little too busy, but
helpful.
The things that drive me, like I mentioned, that some of the things that are annoying about me are things maybe that I'm particularly, like also feed into what I'm good at.
Right.
I'm super techie, and so the fact that I love Canva, and then I've developed skills with Canva, but then wait, I can use that for therapy. And so like, I'm trying to use my strengths, because I mean, I've got plenty of weaknesses. I mean, I can't add.
Don't we all? But I think your excitement for things drives our excitement, right?
Yeah.
I got excited about Canva. I get excited about things that you're excited about, and we appreciate that about you, among other things. But thank you for sharing your excitement for AT and AAC and just the kids we work with.
And I always look forward to your next handout, because it's always spot on, and it's always print worthy, literally print, like put it on your wall, not on your Facebook wall, like actually on your physical wall in your classroom kind of stuff. So I don't think anybody's
they've come a long way, though. I mean, remember the original boot camp, the don't do this and do this. I mean, that was rough. From a graphic perspective, but I did understand that it needed to be quick.
Yeah. The concept was, is there, and we got it. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, we really appreciate you. We know you're going to continue to lead and change, and we are here to continue to follow. But thank you so much for your time today. Thanks for sharing your expertise. Thanks for everything that you give to the field, and so freely and graciously.
My pleasure. I'll keep doing it.
Thanks for coming on our podcast today.
Of course. Thanks for having me.